From all the mortal realms we came, born as all are born, of home and hearth. But when the darkness came for us, we stood our ground and faced it. We stood to protect those we loved and those we did not. We died holding that ground. But death is not the end for souls bound to the God King's service. We were reforged in flesh and steel alike, and we descend from the heavens, the twilight places of the realm, to stand against the darkness eternally, so that you might live to see the dawn. For Sigmar!
It's tabletop time, and I'm Dave, and today I'm going to be basing my Stormcast Eternals. But I'm not just going to be gluing some flock onto a base this time, I'm going to be using some awesome custom resin bases to showcase how you can take your armies and fit them in the universes you're playing in. Let's just dive in and start cleaning up some resin.
I don't know if I'm okay, I don't see the light of day. Looking up to higher ground, thinking that'll be your sweet escape. These days gotta schedule the romance, they say that love is a slow dance. A short bike ride to the crib using no hands, so did it feel like I'm floating? But I'm falling with both eyes closed when I let the world spin. Testing the water, she got my nerves tense. Back when I ain't even have a purpose, I was so eager to learn some things.
And this is the world of resin, cleaning in its little pot of water. It's very good, yes.
Cleaning resin is an extremely important step because it can help remove some strange mold release agents that paint has a really tricky time adhering to. So I thoroughly recommend getting some detergent and some water, warm water, not too hot, and scrubbing those bits of resin clean before you start painting them. I would love to shout out the cool base company that made these resin bases I'm going to be using for my Stormcast Eternals, but unfortunately I genuinely can't remember where I got them from. I bought these bases many years ago when the Sacrosanct Chamber for the Stormcast Eternals came out, with the intention of basing my models in Ulg. Unfortunately, years have passed and invoices have gone in the bin, so I genuinely can't remember where I got these from. I really hope they're still around and I hope I can get more. Maybe someone out there in the comments will be able to identify them and let me know. I let the resin soak for half an hour before I started scrubbing it to really let that soap react with any of that cheeky mold release agent that might be left on the resin. With the bases scrubbed, I then dried them off on some paper towel and put them to one side. It was time for me to mix up some green stuff. I'd be using green stuff to add an extra bit of flair to these bases, making some strange luminescent mushrooms that exist in this twilight realm of Ulg. I wanted to get the green stuff mixed before I went and sprayed the bases because it was important to me that the green stuff wasn't quite so sticky and tacky, and if you mix green stuff and leave it for 5 or 10 minutes before working with it, some of that stickiness can go away. As for the bases, I chose to spray them Corax White. I had used these particular bases once before on 5 Sacrosanct Chamber Stormcast Eternals, and I think I'm going to change how I'm painting them. Over the course of painting Dominion, I've sort of decided to start almost a new Stormcast Eternals army. I love the new aesthetic, and now that I've seen the announcements, including archers and great swordsmen, I am not really feeling the older Stormcast Eternals. They look cool for the most part, but the new proportions just win me over. So after getting the Corax White spray down on the bases, it was time to do some pellet tests. Now, contrast paints definitely have their purpose, and this is one of them. Contrast can give you the color values that you're looking for very quickly and allow you to compare between different alternative choices. The main difference between the two bases I tried was one was darker and one was lighter. Initially, I was drawn to Gryph-Charger Grey. It had a bit of a green in it, and greens play very well with purples and golds. However, upon looking at the model, I wasn't quite sure. It seemed a little bit too light and a little bit too bright, drawing my eye away from the center of the model. Ideally, you want a base to be interesting, but not distracting. So I went at it for another go. The main difference between the two was Space Wolves Grey is much darker and has a blue tone. Using that, I decided that I still wanted to capture some of the eerie alien green. So I changed the color of the dirt to be more of a turquoise, which would work well with the aqua colored glow from the luminescent mushrooms I was making. It was at this stage I began rifling through our awesome box of Gamer's Grass tufts. Putting on a few of the Gamer's Grass tufts was a very quick way to give the base a finished look, despite the fact that it was far from it, which was ideal for testing it. It was at this stage I was going to go and get some opinions and advice. Okay, this is called the Untrained Eye Test, where I'm just getting the gut feeling from people about what they think of which one's better. So Rob, which of these two bases do you like more?
He looks better on this one, but I like that one more. I like that one better.
Then I'd say that one.
That's 2.5 out of 3. I'd say that's pretty good. What about the trained eye test, Jazza?
I, at first, thought I liked the other one more, but I think I'm with everyone else.
All right, with the results of my little test done, I decided to go with the darker themed base. It was time to batch out all of the models. Now, I knew I'd be using contrast paints to sink into the bases and get my foundational colors. So I started using the contrast paint Space Wolves Grey to cover the bases of all the stone areas. So it is the following morning and my green stuff mushrooms should have dried by now, as well as the first layer of contrast that I put down to block out the colors on those bases. But while I was at home, I remembered something I thought would be really good for this. Jen had previously built a Sylvaneth army, and those models come with a lot of little spirits. They're called spites in Age of Sigmar, but they're effectively weird fey insect or fairy-like things. So I've gone home and grabbed a bunch of these, and I think they're going to add exactly what I want to my bases to add that sort of Twilight fairy realm feel to it. There were areas on the bases that I knew I'd be putting bioluminescent mushrooms and also these spite creatures that I'd found. Instead of putting down regular contrast, I roughed out areas that their glow would be taking effect. I used Ethermatic Blue, Eundon Yellow, and Volupus Pink in different areas on the models. The Ethermatic Blue would primarily be for the luminescent mushrooms, but the Eundon Yellow and Volupus Pink would be used for the glowing spites. Once that had dried, I used Vallejo Wolf Grey to dry brush over all of the raised edges of these pieces of stone. With the stone based and dry brushed and the glowing areas roughed out, I was ready to move on to the undergrowth, the rocky dirt that would be underfoot and would be underneath all the flock and scrubs that I would later put on the base. To do this, I went with Pterodon Turquoise, the strange green effect really adding to the fey aesthetic that I'm going for in this Twilight realm. But to add a little bit more earthiness, I blotched in Wildwood contrast as well, intermittently, just chucking it down randomly to give a little bit of texture to the undergrowth. Once that had dried, I was ready to dry brush. I chose a slightly yellowy green for this dry brush, just a gentle color. I didn't want it to be particularly overpowering, as once again, there'll be plenty of textured shrub going on top of this, so I don't want it to be overpowering or stand out particularly. In between waiting for contrast paint to dry, I made sure to get undercoats of Corax White on all of the spites that I would be using and also on the luminescent mushrooms. I then followed the steps that I would be using later in the model, dry brushing them with increasingly bright blends of their base color or close to it and white. Ultimately, the source of any source lighting needs to be the brightest point in the lighting. So I made sure to highlight up to a white mix that I would not be using on the base itself. That way it would ensure that the source of the light was always brighter than the ground it was sitting upon. So Age of Sigmar is set in a place called the Mortal Realms. While there are 8 mortal realms, only 3 of them are really relevant for what I'm making today. And those 3 realms are Azir, Ulgu, and Haish. Azir, of course, being the celestial realm where my Stormcast Eternals hail from. Ulgu being the realm of shadow, and Haish being the realm of light. And it's also the realm that my Lumineth Realm Lords or High Elves come from. So I wanted my Stormcast Eternals, who are their allies, to also come from that place. So this is where my Stormcast Eternals come in. My Stormcast Eternals are from a storm host, which I've made up. They are called the Twilight Sentinels, and they dominate the twin storm keeps of Unsilidun and Silidun, which exist in Ulgu and Haish respectively. They protect a realm gate that connects the 2 portals, and they both exist in this weird twilight dark realm in between Haish and Ulgu that I imagine is full of magic and mystery. So that's really what inspired my purple themed Stormcast Eternals. With the grass dry, it was time to move on to the little items that I'd been really excited for. We have the glowing mushrooms and also the little spites. Building up to brighter lights in each area, I quickly readied myself to glue on the individual spites. And as soon as I did, I was stoked. It's starting to come to life. I can see it already. It still needs a few things though. It still needs some weathering powders and it definitely needs some tufts. Now I'm super stoked because Gamers Grass have actually sponsored this video, and it's such a natural sponsorship because I was already planning on using a whole bunch of tufts on these. I've fallen in love with Gamers Grass tufts, so I use them on pretty much every project I can, and those differing elevations on the base lend an absolute quality of realism to the finished product. Gamers Grass are fantastic for another reason, because they support local brick and mortar stores that stock their products by having a store finder that allows you to find the closest closest stockist to where you live. All right, so I'm going to try putting on tufts prior to using weathering powders and pigments. I haven't done this before, but I have a feeling it's going to help blend them in. I'm going to try and push the weathering pigments in and around the bases of the tufts to really use the weathering pigments to make the whole base feel like it's one cohesive whole rather than a bunch of little elements put together. And so there you have it. I am pretty happy with how they all turned out. I really like certain elements, the twilight colors and the overall colder palette compared to my original attempts with my sacrosanct chamber. I'm quite fond of how the glowing mushrooms play across the teal colors and also how the Sylvaneth spites add moments of character across the bases without completely drawing the attention away from the models. I'm extremely tempted to go out and build an actual gaming board to fit my own Twilight realm of Ulkaish. I really want to do this. Maybe I should do that.
Oh my god, guys, I am so sorry. Dave forgot to record an end to the video, so let's just sort that out, guys. You forgot to end the video. You're like looking at the project that you haven't finished.
What do you mean?
You get an outro.
These guys just saw this though.
Yeah, but you haven't said goodbye. And how, and you know, who's going to thank the patrons?
Thanks, patrons. Thank you very much. Sorry for the, dodgy outro, but hey, you get a little bit of the behind the scenes.
Thank you.
I can't even talk in my outros. Oh my god. We love ya.
We love you.
Wait.
The hell?
Rob, what are you doing in the book?
They say greenery helps with stress, but I don't have enough time to go for a walk.